Life Audio.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer. We'll start the conversation with Peggy and her guests next.
The best-selling illustrated Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
Finding uplifting news in today's headlines is often like searching for a needle in a haystack. At the Story Behind podcast, we believe in the power of finding heartwarming tales and are happy to share empowering stories with you every week. Get inspired by the note a waitress received from a patron dining alone, and even hear about how one VIP passenger made a hardworking pilot get emotional before his flight. To start listening to the Story Behind podcast, visit lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com. Here's Peggy Ployer.
Today we are going to talk about how to put your child in charge of learning. Doesn't that sound amazing? And my special guest today is Leroy Smith. Leroy has a master's in education. He's also the founder and CEO of Realized Curriculum Solutions. And I'll personally add, he is a wealth of information and resources on how to adapt and to really teach a child who's kind of learns outside the box. Leroy's been on the show before. Our recording was a little fuzzy, so unfortunately didn't make it to the podcast. But I tell you, it's well worth the kind of the glitches in the video to go back and watch that. And I'll link that in the show notes for you on both YouTube as well as the podcast, so you can dive into that information as well. But welcome, Leroy. I'm glad to have you back and glad that we have a really solid connection because I'm super excited for what you have to share today.
Yes, thank you, Peggy, for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Absolutely. Yes. So we're going to talk about how to put your child in charge of learning. And I would just love for our audience to just learn a little bit about you. Leroy is a very fascinating man. We were talking ahead of time, and I think we could have just continued the conversation without bringing you guys in because we were just kind of crossing so many different paths. So what would you like our audience to know about you as we get started?
Well, I always say I've been a lifelong educator and just a person who works with children. My experience starts a long, long time ago. Even though I'm young, my mom's mom, when she was alive, she had a daycare in our house, in our apartment. And I was helping her with changing diapers for cousins and local neighbors and getting bottles ready and helping kids learn how to tie their shoes and read to them, even though I was still learning how to read myself. Right. When I was like 4 years old. So I've been working with children since I've been 4. I mean, it's kind of like my life's calling. Yeah. I've been a tutor, when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I've, been with children my entire life. And it really drives me to the work that I'm doing now. And specifically with students with disabilities or specific needs, a lot of people in my family have those particular disabilities, whether it be learning disabilities, mental health concerns, and so forth. And I remember growing up in that, seeing how schools and the community at large and society at large just did not support them the way they needed to be supported to live the kind of lives they wanted to live. And I can see them now as adults now and still struggling through some of those things that could have been addressed when they were children. So it inspired me to get into the work of education myself formally to really, change that for kids and allow themselves to see themselves as competent, confident, and that they can live just as wonderful lives as people who don't have disabilities that are diagnosed. And so that's what I'm in this work for. And I'm really, open, and I kind of go where the needs are. I was telling Peggy that before. I go where the needs are, and I'm always surprised where the need is, and I try to address it where it is. And I'm here to make sure kids are winning and the people who are supporting them are winning.
Yes. Yeah. That's important. And we focus a lot on the kids, but as parent educators, we forget that we are kind of in the need of the change and the support and all of those things as well. Because if we don't change, we can't help our kids change. And so I'm glad that, you have come from enough experience knowing that's essential and seen it in your own life and in the lives, that confidence you were talking about. It's just so important. If we don't gain that confidence, if our kids don't gain that confidence, we will always struggle. And it does lead to what you were talking about too, was that mental health component. And so just teaching kids how to take charge and to learn, and that learning is fun, but also that they can learn, really combats a lot of that in the long run. So yes, but well, that's exciting because, not many people know at age 4 what their calling is. So, and you probably weren't able to label that at that point, but.
Well, actually, when I was in preschool, how like your pre-K teacher is like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up as a kid?
Right.
And my top 2 choices were actually to be the mayor of Baltimore City. Which was very strange for a kid at that time, because I was the only person in the class that said anything of that sort, and also to be a teacher. So, and then my third choice was to be a musician. So I became a teacher and a musician.
Okay, so you just have the mayorship yet to go. I
don't know if I want to do that because it's a little too big. But my reasoning my reasoning for it is that I didn't want people to suffer anymore, and I wanted to do anything within my power to ensure that people can live happy, successful lives. And I'm still in that mission right now. So, yeah,
that's awesome. Yes, we can do that without becoming a mayor, but
that's correct.
Just never know.
I don't think I'm ready for that at all.
So, Leroy gave me a couple handouts, and I will make sure to put those in the description for the YouTube channel and the podcast. I don't have them up yet, but in your the one handout that you sent, the PDF, you talked about 4 steps. Can you generally go over them, about these 4 steps that are integral into helping a student become in charge of their learning?
Yeah. So first I want to kind of define what I think putting a child in charge of learning means is not being afraid to trust your child to go in a direction that you may or may not like them to go in that is beneficial for their learning. And I say that because as a experienced teacher myself, that was the toughest area for me. It wasn't that I didn't know how to support students with like teaching them how to read or count or write.
Right.
It was, I had a hard time trusting that they knew what they wanted and that they wanted to go in a direction that was different than the direction I wanted to go in, but it worked out for them. So I think that's a big part of it, is when you put someone in charge of something, there has to be a level of trust that's there.
Yeah.
And there has to be a level of letting go to allow them to do that, because they may go in a different direction that you may not want them to go, but it may actually turn out to be one of the best decisions that they've made and you made along with them. So I always say, you can definitely tell when someone's going in a direction that they don't need to go in. I think most adults who are caring adults know what that looks like.
Right. Yes. When it's dangerous or yes.
Yeah. But sometimes you just have to kind of let kids explore and kind of figure it out a little bit, because I think that's one of the, to me, I think it's a right for exploration for children.
Yes.
I think it should be a right that's written into the Constitution, personally, of exploration, because I think when kids don't have spaces to explore, they'll never feel in charge. Yeah. And to me, that's actually more of a problem, because
I think, a lot of parents come back to us and they say, I'm just butting heads with my child. And that seems to be what it is. It's that parent overriding and not trusting, when a child just internally knows, I need to go this direction. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And you don't want to produce someone who then wants to be in charge, but sometimes they'll be in charge of the wrong things as they get older. Because that's often what kids do sometimes as they get older, is like, well, since I haven't had the opportunity to build independence, I'm going to build independence somewhere where I feel like I can. And maybe that may not be the safest or best thing for them, as opposed to them having a healthy space to explore with you and kind of going through the highs and the lows of that and figuring out what works. At least you're there as their safety, net, or their cushion, so they can experiment and try those things, and you can keep a close eye on them and give them some space to try it, versus someone else that, that may not have the same intentions as you do for your child. Yes. So I always say that, like, it's better that you put them in charge and they fail at it than someone else letting them be in charge. And not only they fail at it, but they fail at it and hurt themselves or others in the process without even knowing.
Right.
Like, often what happens, they just don't even know because they're still learning.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
So I'll go into the steps. I just want to say that just to kind of put that out there, because I'm always a person that likes to challenge my own thinking, the thinking of others, because I think we have to do that for our children, especially nowadays. We Gen A, Gen Z, all the different gens. we all need a little bit of a challenge in our lives. And
Oh, absolutely. Because we're not challenged. We're not learning, really.
That's correct.
We're just regurgitating information that really just never even we internalized in the first place. After a word from our sponsor, we'll dive back into this conversation. The best-selling illustrated Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible, like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
Hi, friend. Are you stressed? Maybe even worried about so many needs around you that you've forgotten you are worth taking care of too? Well, I'm Bonnie Gray, the host of Breathe, the Stress Less podcast. I want to invite you to join me as I share practical tips based on science, inspired by God's Word, to help you spark joy and restore God's peace and love to your soul. Subscribe now and go to lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.
So step number 1, I put here to investigate interest and identify strengths. I think this is important because when you're trying to put someone in charge of anything and thinking about your child, you have to think about, what is your child actually interested in? Like, are they interested in drawing? Are they interested in reading? Are they interested in sports? Are they interested in music? Whatever it may be for them. Are they interested in cooking? Because those interests are going to naturally build a desire to want to be a leader. I think a lot of people miss that step.
Yeah.
Is that the interest is what, for example, as a kid, I was really into music. I mean, went to school and got a music degree out of that. But I was really into music. So when I was able to be in leadership positions in choir, it didn't feel like it was this thing that I, was begging or clinging for. It didn't feel like I was conflicted about it. It just felt like, okay, this is a natural progression for me because this is something I'm really interested in. Right. And now I'm taking my interest to another level so I can experience something else. So when you're leading from investigating what your child's interests are, you're going to see what they naturally gravitate towards and naturally self-start. That's what you want to look for. What are they starting on by themselves that they're kind of naturally interested in doing? Because they're already showing leadership capabilities straight from that.
Wow. Yeah. I never even thought of like connecting leadership with those interest levels because really they do. They take that charge and that investigation and the movement forward without even a suggestion of what to do, or the prompting. What are you going to do next? Or, all of that. It's just like naturally they just, have the next thing ready to go.
Yeah. And you have less resistance too, because it's something they want to do.
Exactly.
And if it's something they want to do, and I've learned this over time, you can only build leadership capabilities in a space where people want to actually do something in. It is very challenging to build leadership skills in an area that no one wants to be a part of. Or let's just give a good example. Let's just say, you're in charge of a company and your company, makes boxes. And you're the leader of the company and someone's saying that you need help with sales or whatever it is. And you just do not like boxes. You hate boxes. You don't even like being there. It's like nothing that they're saying is going to make you feel better about the fact that you're in a company making boxes. And so it's going to be harder for you to build your skills in that area when you're just not even tapped into it in the first place. You're just like, I'm just doing this just to get paid. I really don't care. And that person doesn't take charge. What happens to that company? Okay, now the company might fail. Now the people who are depending on that person as a leader might not have a job anymore. Or so I think building from a space where people are naturally passionate about something will give them the space to feel like they can take charge because it doesn't feel like a task. It just feels like a natural progression.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Yes, and our kids. Yeah, we kind of wonder, why are we beating our head against the wall trying to get this child to do this? And yet if we just kind of let go of, like you said at the very beginning, just the kind of are wanting to navigate that for them and what education would look like versus, leaning into those areas, it would make it a lot easier. Now, something else you mentioned on that worksheet was not to dismiss areas where a child may have had an interest, but then lost that interest. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this is something that I believe all human beings do. When we're kids, what I might be interested at 3 years old, I may not be interested at 6 years old versus 9 versus 12 versus 30. Like interests change over time and that's okay. And actually, I always say that's a great indicator that your child is maturing if their interests are changing over time. I think when your child is stuck at one interest, and just from my classroom experience as a teacher, when a child is just stuck at one interest and doesn't express interest in anything else, it's often a red flag for me for some form of anxiety that's at the underneath that.
Yes.
Because they're afraid to experiment and explore in other areas that they may be very good at, but they just don't know. Where they feel like they need support, where they just don't feel like they have the skills to advocate for themselves to go down that route. So I actually often say, like, it's okay to let your kids to experiment and their interests to change, but kind of come back to them sometimes and say, hey, last year you were in dance class and this year you're in karate. Like, what changed? Do you like karate better than dance? Do you like dance better than karate? Because we have to get kids to start thinking, and we're going to get to that step in a moment. We have to get kids to start thinking about why are their interests changing? Maybe it's just because the wind blew and that was the thing that was cool.
Or all their friends moved, so they moved with them.
So all my friends are in karate now, so I'm not going to dance anymore. So, that makes sense.
Right.
And so but it doesn't mean that your child still doesn't like dance. It just means that maybe for this season, they just like karate and they might come back to dance later on.
exactly.
And often these initial interest that kids have in the earlier years between like 0 and 6 years old, they resurface over time. For me, it was drawing. I drew a lot when I was a kid, and I'm drawing again just for the fun of it and for, stress relief. They come back, and sometimes you don't know why they come back. Sometimes you do.
Right.
And sometimes these interests become majors that kids go to college for, or industries that they go into. So just, never dismiss that the interest that they had at 3 years old might not resurface at 30, because they might. It just might. And so just keep your mind open and tell your kid it's okay to change your interest, but to be thoughtful about it as you get older, why you're changing your interest. Because that's more important, is the why behind the interest, not the interest itself.
Yeah, I think we don't even bother having those discussions. We're just like, oh, yeah, done and gone, and then we put it out, just to pasture and don't think about it. But my daughter did the exact same thing. At 3, she wanted me to teach her how to sew. And I was like, sewing machine, 3-year-old, this is not safe. But I did it anyways against my best judgment and taught her how to sew. And she had a little interest. We started with paper, something super safe. And then the sewing machine went away. And it was years, but then all of a sudden I heard this machine going, and she had taken it out herself, and she decided she was going to construct a garment because she wanted that garment, and she knew she couldn't find it anywhere else and wanted to do it herself. So yeah, it's crazy, but just not dismissing that will ever happen again. And how powerful that can be, just those things that, maybe it just took her a little more hand dexterity, the realization of how necessary this, interest might be in my life. There's just so many components to that. And a lot of times we speak into that too. And that's another thing, is we say, oh yeah, that was something you did when you were younger. But I think, now after hearing what you said, I'd like to reframe a lot of, things I told my kids is, yeah, but that's something where this came out in you, and to accentuate that even beyond the experience versus saying, oh yeah, well, I tried there, been there, done that. You can just kind of put that away. So I love that.
And it's good to keep track of it too. I mean, I've advised parents to, whether you have a book or a scrapbook or anything like that, if you're taking pictures of your kid in a photo album, just kind of go back and tell them like, hey, when you were younger, you really liked this.
Yeah.
And do you still like that, or do you not like that anymore? And what about it did you not like? What about it did you like? Do you want to still continue this? And a lot of parents, and caregivers kind of take that for granted, to be quite honest, because sometimes that thing they may have been interested in may have just been a bonding activity they have with you.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes when they let go of the interest that was a bonding activity they had with you or someone else in the family, it may be a sign that maybe they don't feel as close to you or want to feel as close to you as they did before, as a lot of teenagers sometimes do.
Right, exactly. Yes.
So,
got to have my own independence, so I'm going to do something that you're not interested in.
And sometimes it's a good place to go back to. Like in your case for sewing, it might be something that you did that was bonding at the time. And maybe, your daughter might come back to him and say, Mom, I just want to spend time with you. And you can go, hey, remember we used to sew together? Let's do that. And it just brings back that nostalgia and the feel goods and the positive memories. So sometimes the interests are therapeutic when we allow people to lead and our students to be in charge. Sometimes it allows them to come back to a space where they can, heal or just receive some kind of empowerment from, because in our lives, we see all over the place how we're not doing things well, or how we're failures and this and that, and how we're not good enough out here. But how empowering is it to go back like, well, I did enjoy doing that.
Right.
Like, I don't care what other people say, but this is something I enjoyed. That's an empowering thing for students. And that makes them want to be in charge because it was from a place of fulfillment.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I love that. Just know, also, I see we have a lot of viewers watching right now. If you have questions or comments, I know some of you posted questions ahead of time for us, and we're going to get to those and incorporate those questions in as well. But let's move on to the next
Yes.
thing that you had in your list about about goal setting and accountability.
Yeah. So just before we move on to that one, the last thing I want to do is differentiate strengths versus interest.
Oh,
And I can do
yes,
that.
absolutely.
So interest is something that your child wants to do. A strength is something that your child can do very well. So
Oh, that's a good yes,
I think that
good
you got
to
to,
clarify.
make that clarification because anyone can want to do anything, but it doesn't mean that they do it well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to find that balance between the interest. Like your child might be very interested in karate, but they just don't do it that well. They can't do a roundhouse kick that well. And it's just a struggle for them.
Yep.
And that leads to the goal setting and the accountability, because after you've identified what your child wants to do and what your child is really good at doing, now you have to start thinking, how do I model goal setting?
Yes.
So when I mean model, I mean that the adults, we're showing the kids what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because you just got to say that I'm not talking about supermodels or anything like that.
Yes.
So we're showing the students or your children what we expect of them. And so goal setting is a very hard set of skills for anyone to do, even as adults. So we have to model at a reasonable ways to set goals with children as they get older and they change developmentally through their different stages. So what that means is modeling for ourselves, like what does it look like to make a goal based upon my interest and my strengths? As an adult, like we have to have that conversation. So I'm going to use an example. Like as a kid and as an adult, I'm really, really, really good at singing different passages as a musician. So for me, I get a lot of, I love jazz and I love scat singing. So it's something I'm really good at and I really enjoy. But if I'm teaching a kid, like let's say I have a kid, my child is taking voice lessons or something like that, and I want to support them. There's something they're interested in taking voice lessons, but they're not that good at it just yet. They're still figuring it out. And most young singers, none of us are really that good when we're young, to be quite honest. But as an adult, I can model how to set a goal behind that by saying, well, last week you were learning how to work on your breath control. And I can say, well, the goal for me this week is I'm going to get better at my breath control so I can sing for a 5 count. Just something as simple as that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can sing one note for 5 counts. Mm-hmm. It may seem silly, it may seem crazy, but it just shows your child, like even you're thinking about it, they're thinking about it. And also now you're going to model accountability. Now you're going to say, how am I going to hold myself accountable for that?
Right.
That means I got to practice. That means I have to do all of what I need to do to think about what does it mean to have good breath control. Maybe I need to read about breath control. Maybe I need to watch some videos about it. Maybe I need to call or consult my voice teacher about it. Maybe I need to try, have a little book where I go, okay, I was able to sing for a 3 count and a 2 count and a 4 count. Now I can do a 5 count. Can I consistently do that? And showing your kid exactly how you're doing something that's the interest of you, that's the strength of yours. Because that's how you show how to be in charge, is that it has to be something you're interested in so they can see how you are monitoring your own interest as well and your strengths as well. Because you can't be a figure of authority or just a leader in something that you're not even really interested in or you're not really that good at. And so your kids have to see you do something. Maybe you're the parent that's really, 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 really good at cooking lasagna. If that's your interest, then lead from there by saying, my goal for the next lasagna I make is I'm going to make it less spicy because the family doesn't like it when I put too many celery and chilies in there. And so maybe that's the goal. And then you put in your little book or in a little whiteboard that people can see, and you can say, hey kids, look, last time I put 5 chilies in there, this time I put 4 in there, and I'm going to see how everyone responds to it. And then you're showing them exactly what it looks like to make a goal, stick to the goal, and check in with that goal each and every time by interest that is for you, because it's going to feel easy. Parents, sometimes we try to speak in areas that we don't feel confident in. And what we're teaching our children is that you also have to speak in areas that you don't feel confident in. And that causes frustration.
Right. Yeah, because I think a lot of times when we talk goal setting, we talk goal setting in places where we struggle. And so, set a goal so that you get better at that. But I've never heard it from this perspective, but I love it because it does help you move to that area eventually.
Yeah.
But if you have to learn to set goals in that strength area first. And I think that's a good point too to make is we so badly want for our kids to have those goals in areas that they're immature in but they can't be in that place until they learn that leadership, like you were talking about in the last step, in that area of interest. So good.
Because you don't want to build resentment. That's what I've seen a lot is that, okay, you're talking about a lot of the goals in the areas that are challenging for your kids.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, your kid's going to internalize, and most people internalize this. Think about a boss that you work for. If all they did was talk about goals of how things you're not doing well, you may assume that you're not doing your job well.
Yeah.
Even if you are, you could be the star employee of the month, but you may not know that because all that's being focused on is what you're not doing well.
Right.
But if you make goals from areas where you are doing well and that you can maximize from that, it's going to give you the momentum and the energy to address and want to address the areas. That's where you're putting people in charge now, because now the kid's going to want to address what they're not good at because they want to address it, not because you're making the biggest deal out of it.
Right.
Because you can make a big deal out of all you want. And adults, we all know we can make big deals out of things with our children. And guess what happens?
We're really good at that.
It blows up in our face. And we're like, holy cow, like what's going on? But if they have the desire to do it, now we can work in that area. Okay, you weren't that good at this area. Now you want to tackle it. Let's tackle it. Because you made the decision that you want to tackle that area. And sometimes as adults, we can make the executive decision, of course. But wouldn't it be a better situation if your child felt as though you consistently uplifted them through their strengths? So then when you do address those areas of concern, they feel like it's really small. They feel like it's really a lot more manageable because all they've heard were more positives than negatives. So they feel like they have the energy to address that negative or whatever that thing might be that's a challenge area.
Yeah.
And it just makes them feel like they're in charge, even if they may not be the greatest writer or reader or mathematician just yet. Just imagine the level of confidence and poise they will have if all they've heard is the majority of what they heard is positive things and building on their strengths. They're going to want to go, hey, like, I'm not that good at multiplication. Like, I really want to get good at this, mom, dad, or whomever's taking care of me. Could you help me? Now, that's the kind of learner that's in charge because they're advocating for herself. And that's what we want the kids to be, is that a space to advocate for self as they become adults, because now they're in charge of addressing what needs to happen and not us. Because sometimes we think we're addressing what needs to happen and we cause friction. And the friction becomes more important to the child than what we're trying to help them with. Yeah,
I can see, we get our identity wrapped up in these goals. And it in a way it is, because it's how we see ourselves becoming better. And we always want to improve ourselves, but it can be uplifting if that goal is something that is something where we're already good and getting better than that. But like you said, we're always focused on the I'm not good enough yet. And this is all about me trying to get better at something I'm not good at. That can take you down the other way. And it can be very self-defeating.
And it's a mindset shift too. I always say, I tell every kid and student I've ever had, when you're in front of me, you were already wonderfully and beautifully created. There's nothing that you have to do differently to prove to me that you're not already an amazing human being. My job is just to do as an educator is to ensure that you have skills that you want to use and need to use to become even a better version of who you already are. You're already at a 10. Yeah. I'm trying to get you to 11, 12, 13, 14, 20.
That's great.
So I think saying that, and that's been a big shift for a lot of the students I had when I had a lot of students who were, they would fight a lot, curse, scream, a lot of these different things. But often those students tell me, and some of them are adults now in college, still tell me when I see them in public, that Mr. Smith, you're the first person who actually told me I can do something well. Like I'm good as I am, and I have to do nothing to prove myself to you.
Yeah.
That's it. I think we have to put that in the mix, because then you're going to feel like you're in charge of something, right? Wouldn't you feel more in charge if someone told you you're already great?
Yeah.
You don't have to prove yourself to me. You were great because you're just a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm here to do is to help you be even more of a great person. It makes you want to feel like, let me step up then. If they're saying I'm a 10,
exactly. Yeah, if you see that in me.
let me step up. I don't see that right now, but let me step up because you see it. It's a different kind of mindset. And that's what gets us into the next thing, which is executive functioning skills.
Right. Can we talk just a little bit about that mindset shift before we head there? What kind of time frame do you see for kids being able to make that shift, especially if they're really feeling down on themselves? You know, what should parents realistically expect that to take and to work towards? And I'm assuming it depends on the child. It depends on how much trauma they've had in learning or just in self-talk and other things. But you got any words of wisdom in that area?
It is a little tricky because it's pretty individualized, but I will say, at least from some of the research that's out there, that students start to recognize their academic challenges as early as first grade. So that's around the age of 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7, around that time. So I will say that's a good time to really kind of, think about things. And even before then, think about, prime example, there's some research now proving that, kids start to really begin to understand they're different racially or gender-wise around like 7. So, like kids can comprehend some things that are out there. I think we don't give kids enough credit that they're very observant of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing. So I would say as early as you can. I mean, it's as simple as letting your 2-year-old, when your 2-year-old's going through the no phase.
Oh, yes. That's a wonderful phase.
Like everyone knows that phase that, younger kids go through, where it's no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And just checking in with them. Why don't you want to do that? Like, what is it that you don't want to do? Do you not want to do that because I gave this to you, or is it someone else that gave it to you? Really investigating then, because what they're doing is, I think it's like intuitive in our humanity. When we're getting to that no stage, it's our first entry into developing barriers in the world.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do these things. No. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to. Maybe I'm overwhelmed. I don't know.
Right.
And so I think as early as you can, allow your kid, if they want, when it's cleanup time, to congratulate your kid when they just pick up one toy, even if when you didn't tell them to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's just that small. Like, they picked up a toy and they put it back where it belonged, and you didn't have to tell them. You need to give them praise for that and saying thank you, because you are showing you really care about this house and yourself and taking care of yourself. And some people think, oh, they just picked up a toy. What a big deal. They got to do it anyway. But let me tell you something. As they become adults, and I'm going to speak for myself as a man, there are a lot of men that I know that would feel a lot more appreciated in our relationships if we just got a compliment on some of the small things.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, we take those things for granted because we say they are expected. Yeah, they are expected. But sometimes even when it's expected, it's still nice to hear, thank you for doing that. Yeah. It shows that you care. Because expectations are what they're going to be. But if you don't actually have some kind of reinforcement there, the expectations go away after time. Like, people start to go, well, it's not like I'm being appreciated for this. And that's what happens to the students and children. Well, it's not like I'm being appreciated for this. So why even try? I'm not even interested in it anymore. When it's not that they lost their interest in whatever it was more so they didn't feel appreciated or respected or loved while they were doing that interest. And that's why they lost their interest. That's
and
why
get the positive feedback that maybe came at the beginning of that. Yeah. And then over time, you just kind of expect them to be that way, and you stop giving that praise. Yeah.
Because we need it. We need those positive affirmations to get through life, because life is not easy.
No,
and,
absolutely not.
It just isn't easy. And just imagine a world where people just said, thank you for showing up to work today. Because I know I've been tough on you lately as a boss, but thank you for showing up to work today because you didn't have to, but you chose to. And I appreciate you for that.
Right.
Like, you know how many people might actually want to stay at that job? Not
right. Exactly.
That's how you put someone in charge. That person's going to feel like, oh, my boss or whomever values me. Maybe I can take on something else. Maybe I'm better than I thought I was. Maybe I can do this project that they gave me I didn't think I can do. It starts as young as we can get. I always say 2 years old is where you can start a lot of things, because it's a time when they're first kind of saying, I don't want to do things.
Right.
And that's a good place to start from. You always want to start from that young age. I don't want to do something, because it gives you a bigger, like a window opens about what is their like testing point. What is their barrier? Versus once they become 13-year-olds are very secretive. I've worked with them. They're very secretive. They're very covert. That is not a good time to start asking a lot of questions, because at that point, they're going to want to talk more to their peers as they get older, and they're not going to share as much with you as much anymore. So that's why I say start at 2, because at least you'll kind of know what your kid might be keeping secret from you when they're 13.
Exactly. They're not smart enough to know how to do that.
Exactly. More early, you can kind of
haven't learned those tricky methods. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to dive into executive functioning next. And why is that so important in this shift of putting your child in charge? What do those skills, what foundation do they provide?
Executive functioning skills sound like what they are. They're skills that we activate in our brain consciously, I would say that. It's not something that we do subconsciously often. Almost all human beings I know, we have to do it consciously. We have to make the decision to organize, to plan, to goal set, to track, to sort out, and to analyze. All of these are the executive functioning skills that help us learn and do anything in life, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
We all use executive functioning skills every day, all day. For a prime example, we do it probably without thinking. Everyone has a morning routine when they get up in the morning, or whatever time they get up to do their daily activities. You usually wash your face, you usually brush your teeth, all those kind of things. They're executive functioning skills, because you're planning what you're going to do and you're executing it. That's all that means.
Oh, okay.
But for a child that's trying to be in charge of their learning, they're going to have a harder time being in charge if they don't feel like they're as organized as they could be, or they don't have systems of organization that work for them. Yes. They're not going to feel like they're in charge if they struggle with planning out things, because a person who's in charge makes plans. And they execute those plans. They're not going to feel like they're in charge if they're struggling with planning. They're not going to feel like they're in charge if they're struggling with like analyzing what happened and how I got them there and where to go from there. So supporting executive functioning skills means, once again, we're going back to modeling adults, like showing your kids, like, this is how I make a plan to pay the bills or to do whatever it may be in a house. This is how I make a plan to cook a meal. This is how I follow. It's a good place to do this is always in the kitchen. You can have a recipe book. That is recipe books are perfect for executive functioning, because it tells you all the ingredients, how much the ingredients are, so the measurements for the ingredients, what steps to do. They're built to help people in their executive functioning. So you got to think, like, a person who's not the best cook with a good recipe book can seem like a really good cook. And so that's how you need to think about executive functioning skills and supporting them. Think about all the things that they need to be successful with whatever their interests and their strengths are. Put that all out on the table and model step by step. Okay, you're really good at blank. Like I said before, like with singing 3-4 counts, singing 1 over 3-4 counts. Okay, now we got to do 5 counts. That means you got to take in a little bit more air. So let's practice taking a little bit more air. Maybe you need a straw to practice taking in more air. Maybe you need whatever it may be to take in more air for that count. Just putting it all out there and then helping them sort through each little step that's going to help them get there. And once you see that there's some automaticity that's coming out of that, once you see that there's a level of independence that's kind of showing, then you can kind of step back. Because the last thing you want to do is, be there for every little thing all the little time, because it's going to be burnout for you, and it's going to feel like you're a helicopter parent to the child. So you want to give them the room and support them with, of course, their decisions and making those decisions. But once you see that they can do that, without you pretty much, I would say 7 times out of 10, kind of just let them do it. And
Right.
don't stick with them 10 out of 10 situations. Because here's what happens. Then they become overly dependent on you.
Yes. Yes.
Let them have some space where there can be some small failures along the way, because we learn from our mistakes. Let them be some space. Let them get like 70% of the way there when you support them with making those decisions and planning and organizing and all those things. And then let them have some mistakes along the way. Let them go, hey, mom, dad, or whomever, I thought I had it, but I don't really have it. Because now they're going to want to come to you.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's going to make them feel more in charge, because you weren't putting the issue out there. They were addressing the issue with you. It makes them feel more mature. It makes them feel confident they can advocate for themselves.
Right.
Because now there's been a little bit of failure, and now they want to come to you, versus you've never allowed them to try it on their own, and they just are tired of you being a helicopter person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so give them a little bit of space where there's some room to make mistakes and readjust, because that happens in life all the time. And that's when your executive functioning skills are most, necessary, is when you have to have an adjustment or you have to pivot in your life. And that's not going to happen if you're doing all of the thinking for them. That's not going to happen if they're very dependent on you. It has to be a healthy space that I'm going to help you get to a certain point, and then you have to kind of try some things out, and then we'll readjust after a while.
Right. But that's when true learning just starts to take place, too.
That's correct.
And that's when they start to internalize it, and they kind of work those things out for themselves. And I think we miss that so often in our teaching, because we think it's just about, the right answer and about following the set process. But when the struggle hits, that's when the real learning's happening.
That's when the real learning is happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not as important. I think we have this mindset that, okay, my child has to have a 4.0 GPA, or they have to have A in every class. That's great. But the question is, because I went to a college where I worked with people who were, top of their classes. And they just struggled with like a lot of different things and had no idea how to overcome those struggles. And those struggles consumed them. Yeah. To the point that they went from being A students to the stress being so much for them and being so codependent that they became C and D students within a semester or two. And so you want to be careful, because you have to allow your kids to have, and I know it's hard because as adults, we don't want to see our kids struggle. We just don't want to do it. But sometimes we have to, and say, okay, what did you try? Did you try this? Did you go back on the things that we talked about before? Did you try anything new? Did that work? Did that not work? That's that accountability measure that we talked about. Right. Do we need to reset the goal? Is the goal too much for you? Do we need to readjust the goal that is more doable for you so you can have more success? Those are the kind of conversations we want to have, versus great, you got an A, you're smart. That doesn't get kids to new places. And in fact, it builds ego in a world that we have a lot of egos in. We don't need more people like that, because the people that lead with their egos don't really feel in charge. They feel insecure, and that's why they have to force themselves to be in charge, versus actually feeling in charge and not having to assert themselves on anyone. That's the difference. So true. Absolutely. Yes. So the fourth point that you're going to talk about is that monitoring. And how do we do that? How do we monitor that progress? So, the easiest way is having some little book or chalkboard or a dry erase board in your house, or a spreadsheet, or anything the kids can see their progress. Maybe one week they were struggling with dividing, and, maybe they had like 2 out of the 5 questions correct on their activity. Maybe the next week is 3, and then the next week is 4, and the next week is 5. So they can see themselves improving and hear themselves improving. I think often, once again, you're going to feel like a failure if you cannot see your own progress. Yeah. But if you can see even the smallest little nudges forward, you start to gain a little bit more confidence. Like, okay, I didn't think I can do this the first time I tried it, but as I keep working at this thing, I'm getting better and better and better and better. And thinking about it even from the strengths. Imagine you're already really gifted at baking cakes, and now you're learning how to make a souffle. And the first souffle sunk, the second one sunk, the third one sunk, but the fourth one, it rose correctly, but it didn't taste right. And the fifth one, it rose correctly, but it tasted a little bit better. The next one, like
Right.
it's just, you start to grow like in your area of strengths and interest when you can see that you're growing. Because sometimes when you're in a space of failure, you see the gap is a lot bigger. So just think about it. If you're at a zero, if you're at a zero and the expectations be at a 70, you're going to feel like that's a mountain to climb.
Right.
But if you're at like a 60 and you're just trying to get to a 70, you're going to feel like, okay, I can kind of do that. Let me try that out.
Right.
Or if you're at 80 and you're trying to get to a 90, I can kind of do that. But if you feel like you have a mountain to climb for every little thing, you're not going to feel in charge of anything. You're going to feel like other people are in charge of you. They have to tell you how to get there. And if you don't listen to them, you'll never get there. Yeah. And that's the message that a lot of our children are receiving, is that we're starting from this deficit model where you can't do blank. So I'm showing you how to do blank. We're going to track the progress, but you're going to see that you're so far behind where you have to be that you're going to keep internalizing, I'm behind, I can't. A person who starts to think that and believe that doesn't feel empowered to take charge, because they feel as though they're too far behind to even start to take charge.
Exactly.
Versus starting from a place where they're strong in and saying, hey, you're at 85% with like making puzzles or whatever it is, or whatever it may be. And I know you want to do better. What's better for you? And allowing them to set that, like, what's better for you? Maybe they are at a 50 and we want them at 80. What's better for you right now? Well, I just want to get to a 60. Great. We're going to get you to a 60. Versus, that's not good enough. You should be getting that.
Right. We want that gap like just eliminated immediately, because a system that's the problem is we believe in these systems that are going to take our kids from this 0 to 100 and really internally, what you've been talking about this whole hour is those systems have to come from internally and from where they instinctively know that they need to go in order to get themselves better across the board in things. And even as a parent, we have to be willing to dive into those things and just be okay with where they take us.
But that's the thing that I said at the beginning. You have to be willing to let go, because the way that we were educated is the way that we were educated.
Right.
Hey, no one's saying it's bad. No one's saying it's good. But your child in these days and times, if you really want them to feel in charge, it's going to be hard for them to feel that. I mean, when we were growing up, there was no such thing as social media.
Yeah.
But our kids are in a space where you have these content creators and all these other things that people look like they're in charge, even if they might not be.
Right.
And so our students just have other things to consider that we didn't have to consider within our generation of learning. And if we want them to feel like they're in charge, we have to let go of some of the preconceived notions that we've had about how kids learn, when they should have things mastered. Because if you keep holding on to that, your kid's going to keep feeling, they're going to be the kid that's like, well, my mom, my dad expect me to get married and have kids by a certain time. And if I don't have kids and get married by a certain time, then I'm a failure. We don't want them to internalize that. And that starts young. That starts that my mom and my dad expect me to be an A+ student in first grade, and I'm not at this point. And then your mom and your dad is hawking at you. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Oh, we got to pay for a tutor. Oh, we got to do this. We got to do that. And next thing you know, your whole life is defined by what they want you to do versus what you want to do and what you need to do. And then you start to feel like you're a failure because your whole life is determined by what other people want of you. You're never going to feel in charge that way. But if you feel like your life is kind of going where I want to go here. I know sometimes my parents and family might steer me this place to kind of support me, but at least they're kind of still aligned with me. They're always going to feel like they're in charge, even when they might not be. Even if you make an executive decision as an adult to say, look, we really have to do this.
Right.
But if you've done more of allowing them the space to be who they are, they're going to be willing to do that. They're going to think that when you told them to do that, and them saying yes, that they were in charge of that decision.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes they're going to, I've had kids say this before. It's like, well, yeah, of course I want to do that. Of course I want to do what you told me to do. And it's because they felt like they were in charge of a decision that I gave, of a decision I made for them. Because I went to them and I asked them for their permission to go that direction. and they went that direction with me so that they can better themselves. And it was less resistance, more learning, more success, more joy, because they didn't feel like I was getting in their way. They felt like I was just helping them find their way, which is a difference.
You turned into more of a coach than the person who was kind of breathing down their neck and saying, here's the next step, here's the next step, kind of more their executive functioning master.
They have their own brain. They have their own brain. Let them use it.
Exactly. So I think that one of the questions we had from one of our viewers was very similar to what we were just talking about. She asked, how do we motivate a special ed child to learn how to read and write?
Yeah, so this one is a fun one. So thank you, Cordy, for your question. I had a chance to think about it a little bit. I think, once again, going back to interest for reading, start curating books that are based around your child's interest. Yeah. If your kid's really interested in cooking, get a bunch of cooking books and bake with them or cook with them or grill with them. If your kid's really interested in dinosaurs, get some dinosaur books. If your kid's really into, funny, goofy books, get some Diary Wimpy Kid books. I always say start there because they're going to want to read those things. Right. Even if they cannot read those things just yet, like they don't have the skills to read all the words in the text just yet, they're going to want to read it. And they're going to ask you, can you read this to me? I really want to read it. Can you read this to me? Yeah. They're going to feel like they're in charge because they're asking you to read that for them because it's something they're interested in. In terms of writing, having writing tasks that are just fun. Sometimes I think the writing tasks that we have are just very tough, tough,
Agreed.
Maybe it's just like, let's go outside and let's just draw pictures and write about the things that we see. Like, it could be as simple as that. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything very convoluted. I think sometimes we think that our kids have to have this immense wisdom, and they're like 7 years old. Do you expect a 7-year-old to have that amount of wisdom? Even an 18-year-old that had that amount of wisdom. I wasn't like 5 to 18. And so we can't use that as a benchmark. So sometimes it's just like writing a grocery list. Come on. These are things that are easy wins for us. That can be one way to get them. Hey, can you help me write the grocery list? What things do you want from the market?
Right.
Now you're putting them back in a position of power. Yeah. And now they have to write it. Okay, if you want that, you got to write it here on this page. Because that's the only way I'm going to get it if you write it on this page for the market list. Yeah. That's one way of getting them in there. Like, okay, well, how do you spell bananas? Or how do you spell, ravioli?
Right, because they want to do it because they want the end product.
Exactly. Yep. And now you can teach that reading and that writing lesson in a very functional way. Maybe as you're planning a trip with your family, you're getting your kid to read a map. Like, where are we going to be? Let's look at the hotel. Let's look at the hotel signs. Are we going to be at this hotel, the Hilton? Are we going to be at this hotel, the Holiday Inn? Which one starts with an H are we going to go to based upon our itinerary? So it's all these different ways that you can build in reading and writing. And what are some things you want to do on a trip? Oh, you want to go see the gator exhibit? The exhibit? Okay, let's figure out how to spell exhibit because we got to search it up online to buy the tickets. So let's figure out how to spell gators. Is gators short for another longer word? Oh, alligators. So you see what I'm saying? Like, those are ways that you can get your kid into that are very functional, very easy.
And you're turning it so you're the one asking the questions. I'm hearing that as you're talking, instead of being the instigator where they would just say yes or no. You kind of have to shift into, I'm asking the question, you have to give me the full answer now.
That's correct. Yeah. And even if you've already made the decision, you probably already paid for the vacation or whatever it may have been. But now you're still asking your kids, hey, what time do you want to go to the beach today? Do you want to go 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock? Do you, what kind of swim trunks do you want to wear to the beach? What kind of things do you want to get to, what kind of floaty devices do you want to have in the pool? What kind of things do you want from the store? Like, I already have to get the essentials at the house, but what's the one thing you want to score? Is it the chocolate bar? But you got to spell chocolate first before we get it. It's fun. It's fun things like that, because then they're going to want to write functionally before they write academically, because there's functional writing and academic writing. Well, we had to first get them writing functionally first and then translate that over to academic writing. Like with a chocolate bar, functionally, you could say, I want a chocolate bar and spell out chocolate. And then you could say, well, let's do some research. Where does chocolate come from? And now you can write about the process of how chocolate is made. And now your kid can write a how to make chocolate process for that, because it's something you're already interested in.
Right.
It's something they've had an opportunity to write about in a very functional way. It's something that they know about. And now you can build some other things around it, like, oh, chocolate comes from different parts of the world. And this is how it's made. And here's who makes it. You know, like, I think that's one way of how you can get your child to learn how to read and write when they have special needs. It's just more interesting, engaging, and it leads to the more academic.
Right. I think we skipped that. We moved to the academic much quicker, and that it kind of throws our kids for a loop because, young kids are practical and they have lots of questions. So why not we just dive into those questions? We did have a question from Christine, though, who does have a high school student. And she said, how do you deal with a kid who gets frustrated easily, who's in high school and needs to work to graduate?
Well, when I was looking at this question, I was thinking about what is the root cause of the frustration? Because high schoolers have a lot on their plate. They're in sports, they're in band, they're in choir, they're in this, they're in that. They're thinking about going to college or going to work, or maybe they're already working. Maybe they're looking after their younger siblings. You know, it could be a whole host of things.
Right.
I think you really got to get to the root source of what is the source of frustration. I always say anytime a student is frustrated, there's usually some kind of anxiety around something that's going on. Maybe they don't feel good enough to do something.
Yeah. Maybe
they don't feel prepared to do something. Maybe they feel disconnected. Maybe, one of the recommendations I would have is think about any kind of communal sports or activities that you can connect them with, because usually I look at it like a hierarchy. If there's frustration at the top, usually there's some anxiety around something sprinkling in there. And then the way that you do that is really the root thing of that is connection. Often people get frustrated when they feel disconnected and feel anxious about things. So maybe your high schooler needs maybe a change in a sport or a club or organization or something that's out in the community that's really fun for them. Maybe they need more time, just journaling or, self-reflecting or spending time out in nature. I think you really have to think about the root cause, but almost always in my personal experience and professional experience, I've seen that the root of frustration is a lack of connection and not feeling connected to something so much that it makes you feel frustrated. And you feel like someone's forcing you or coercing you to do something that you may not want to do or that you don't feel prepared to do. So I definitely would say start there, see what they might be anxious about, see where they feel like they're not as connected as they would want to be, and kind of go from there and then kind of reevaluate and say, now that you've tried blank, blank, and blank, like, do you feel better about this? And that's kind of going back to that monitoring progress and goal setting that we talked about. Now that you tried this, do you feel better at it? Or do you still feel frustrated? And maybe after they try something, they're better able to express what was the initial source of the frustration. Right. Sometimes you got to try something to get something back, because that's how kids work. Sometimes you got to try something, and then sometimes they'll give you more information. And try, it's like, no, that didn't work for me. And you're like, why? It's like, because I really was upset about this, and I didn't really need that. And that's the place to start. Sometimes you just got to do something. Yeah. You could just, wherever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And too, we as parents, it's sometimes our anxiety that goes back onto our kids. When we homeschool, it's a lot of our fears that come in to cause them anxiety. And so
but remember, your child,
mom and dad have to self-check on that one too.
Remember, your child, when they were created, was already created to be a wonderful, amazing human being. So you always come back to that mindset that my child is a wonderful, amazing human being. I'm helping them be even more amazing than they already are.
Absolutely.
They're going to feel less frustrated and you're going to feel less frustrated, which will allow you to make better decisions together.
Yeah. Amen. So the last question from one of our viewers, I think, is a really good wrap-up question. What would be your number one recommended area to focus on to foster better independence in my child? So if parents were listening to this conversation we've had today, where should they start?
I think the first thing to start is defining what you mean by independence. Because a lot of parents say they want their children to be independent, and that means a lot of different things to different people. In my personal experience, I was always a very independent kid, and my parents wanted me to be independent, but it wasn't because they wanted me to be independent for my own self-fulfillment. They wanted me to be independent because, and I'll self-disclose a little bit, is because our household was full of trauma and mess. So they wanted me to be independent to assume a parental role for my younger siblings. They didn't want me to be independent for my own well-being. Right. And so you see what I'm saying? Like independence to my parents means something different than what it might mean to Dawn.
Right.
And so I think you have to really think about, what does independence mean? And a part of independence means that your child may do something that you don't like, that you don't agree with.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
That, that works for them or doesn't work for them. And so I would say really think about that, because independence is scary for some parents. Some parents have a hard time letting go because they know how scary the world is.
Right.
And I feel you in that. I don't have kids of my own, but I have godchildren. I have nieces and nephews. So I feel that like sometimes it's hard. And I've taught a lot of students over the year, hundreds of students. And it's hard sometimes to, let go of the reins. But the thing I've learned in that is that how I defined independence is giving students the space to be themselves when they want to be themselves without me getting in the way. That's how I look at it. And so I don't look at it as students doing things separately from me. I've never looked at it that way, because when you do that, they become adults thinking that they don't need you anymore. And as people get older, we still need our family
those
units. We
connections
still
like
need our
we're talking
communities.
about. Yes.
I still speak to some of my teachers that I had when I was in pre-K through 12 today, like as a curriculum coordinator. I still speak to them like, hey, how do you do this? Hey, how did you work through that concern? Hey, can you, so don't think independence is all about your kids just doing everything by themselves. My definition of it is allowing kids to be whoever they are, and me just giving them the space to do that. And when they need me, I am there. And when they don't need me, I need to step back.
Yeah.
And so just finding a healthy line there, because you don't want someone to be overly dependent on you, but you don't want someone to be totally not dependent on you to the point that they struggle and they'll never let you know. And you might have heard these stories before. Kids go to college, next thing you know, they're living in their car or they're homeless. Their parents have no idea. Is because the parents were saying, you have to be independent. You have to fix everything that happens in your life. And what if something bad happened to them that was out of their control? And now they feel as though they have to be so independent, they can't come to you. So they would rather be homeless than come to you, knowing that you could support them. So I say that because I've had friends like that who've gone through that. And so that's why I said, Dawn, think about how you define independence, because it's a double-edged sword sometimes. It's a great thing when it's good, and it's a horrible thing when it's bad. So just think about how you define it.
That's a great answer. And a great way to end this conversation. It's been amazing. Leroy, talk a little bit about your website and what people can find there and some of the services that you offer families.
Sure. So Realize Curriculum Solutions, we started back in 2020. Hard to believe it's been 3 years already, August of 2020. And what we do is we support parents and caregivers and educators with just accelerating student learning and supporting students specifically who have disabilities or learning challenges. We look at, the curriculum that's being implemented. We support with curriculum adaptations at the homeschool environment. We do professional learning with educators and parents around how to build more independence, like Dawn was looking for, and how to put kids in charge of their own learning, and just how to navigate the different learning styles and nuances of students. We also support families with some advocacy. I'm going to kind of step back a little bit in the advocacy space, just because of my new role and me going into a space where I've been really supporting a lot of parents and educators with what we're talking about today, and making sure students feel in charge, because often our students with disabilities feel powerless in a world that they are very competent in. There was a stat from the U.S. Department of Education that said that 90% of the students and people in general who are of working age in the United States who have a disability can work any job, any career.
Yeah,
but did you know that 75% of people who have disabilities work low-wage jobs? If 90% of them can work any job, then why are 75% of them, delegated to low-wage jobs?
Right. It goes back to that mindset you were talking about.
It goes back to that job.
Absolutely.
It goes back to that mindset. So if we change our mindset and if we change as adults, that's what I'm all about, like helping people realize that we can do different things. We don't have to just keep doing the same old thing just because, it worked for my parents. It worked for me. I always say tradition is good when it's good, but it's bad when it's bad.
Absolutely.
Like it's good when it's good, because tradition can, keep cultural norms together, which can be a healthy thing if they're healthy for that individual or the people in that culture. But it can also be bad because you don't think outside the box.
Right.
You're limiting your child to a box that was preset by someone generations ago, where your child is a different child. Like 100 years ago, there was no social media. We were just 100 years ago, cars were just starting to become a thing. Right. So it's like we can't keep doing what we have been doing and thinking that it's going to work. That's literally the definition of insanity under Albert Einstein's views. So we have to try something different. And that's what I'm all here about doing, is helping people realize you don't have to do all the same things. And so that's what we do. We can, meet, we talk, I do all kinds of things. We do, school visits, we do homeschool consultations. So you let me know. I'm here for you. I'm going to challenge you. I'm not one of those kind of people that's, I don't like getting paid and telling people what they want to hear. I would rather you pay me and me be very honest with you. So that means that sometimes we might have to take a mindset shift, and sometimes I might have to step back and take a mindset shift. So I'm very honest and open about that, because
that's awesome.
Why not be? We only have this life to try to figure things out, and hopefully the next life it'll be figured out. But in this lifetime, let's figure it out together.
All will be perfected at the end. That's what we're hoping for.
I always say it's like this lifetime is our rehearsal for the big show.
Oh, yes,
the big
absolutely.
Show is what we leave to our children and our children's children. Yeah. So this is our rehearsal, parents, and either you break a leg to get on the stage, or you don't. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Leroy. Make sure you check out his website at realizedcurriculumsolutions.com, and make sure you put the www in front of that. I will put the link in the YouTube description as well as the podcast, just so that you can make sure that you can find that if you're looking for that. And I'm so glad that our connection worked. This was, again, an amazing conversation, and I will link the previous interview that Leroy did with me. But thanks for all that you do. I know that your life is going in many directions. We were talking about that previously, and I'm just excited to see where God takes that, and have you back again.
Thank you. I would love to be back and powwow with you. I enjoy being on your platform, and I hope to all the parents out there, keep up the fight, keep up the faith. You are doing something that is very brave, and don't feel like you're doing this by yourself. Peggy has done a wonderful job connecting you with people out in the field who are really doing some wonderful things that can support you. So reach out. Don't be afraid. We're all here to support each other.
Absolutely. Yes. I love talking to people that have backgrounds in education, because I don't. I just learn as you do. I'm coming along in these conversations, but I'm so excited. Just the many people. We're going to be talking about math. Actually, I've got a second interview this week. We're going to be talking about making math concepts easier. So you're going to want to come back for that conversation.
That I love math. I love teaching math.
Yes, I know it'll be fun. So anyway, so check out Leroy's website. If you got other questions, you can always search our YouTube channel, our website. We've got thousands of videos, or over 1,000 videos, and lots of articles on our website, just tons of resources. We know everybody has different needs, so just search. Don't watch them all. You don't have enough time in the day or a week or a month to do that, or probably a year. So anyways, but thanks for being part of our community, for watching, and we'll see you all again here next time on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Until then, God bless, and take care, everybody. Bye. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Our world can feel chaotic and uncertain, but we don't have to live enslaved to fear. Christ has promised me and you his peace, and throughout Scripture has provided powerful tools and practical steps to help us experience greater freedom. I'm Jennifer Slattery, lead host of the Faith Over Fear podcast, inviting you to join me and my team as together we learn how to starve our fears and feed our faith. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com or wherever you access podcast content.